Ah, it's Willie Nelson. He's declared his eternal enmity against the New World Order on this radio show, along with thousands of other prominent people. But we've got somebody who likes the New World Order, an apologist for it. He is the former head of the Kissinger Group. He is one of the top people at the Carnegie operation that has shaped this wondrous world we all live in. And he wrote the last book, Running the World. He has his new book out, bound to be a bestseller, Superclass, the global power elite and the world they're making, all about the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, CFR. And he is, of course, David Rothkopf, and we appreciate him coming on. I guess kind of the new generation of Henry Kissinger prototypes. And we appreciate him spending time with us. And I was talking to him in the break, and I said, I started talking. I said, "Hello, sir. Thanks for coming on." He started laughing. And I said, you know my views. He said, "Yeah, I know them." So we appreciate him coming on. Thanks for coming on with us.
My pleasure.
So tell us all about the New World Order and about the Superclass and the people that run it all for us.
Well, Superclass is looking at how power has changed in the modern world and how, there have always been elites, but what's emerged in the past 20 or 30 years is an elite that operates on a global stage as opposed to a national stage. And obviously when an elite's on a national stage, you've got this kind of umbrella of sovereignty, laws, and other things that can help rein them in and give people at large a voice. But on the global stage, of course, you don't have that. You've got big companies that can play countries against each other. You've got small clusters of people who can influence how financial markets that might be regulated in a country operate beyond regulation on the global stage, and so on. And so what the book's really looking at is how this shift is impacting our lives, whether it's diminishing the influence of nation states, who's rising, who's falling, and tries to, ask the question, what do you do about it?
So this is the model I saw in think tank papers 25 years ago, where we're going to give the slaves a choice of, are we going to have a world government system that you have a stake in, or is it going to be a world government system that you don't have a stake in, but we end up with world government either way? And as you write in your book, we basically have these non-governmental organizations that are trained SEALs for the 6,000 super elite. I love how you guys engineer each crisis and then offer each new solution to the crises that were created by the global super vampires.
Well, I don't use the term super vampires, and I don't refer to trained SEALs in the book. What I do try to do is look at what the trends are and ask the question, what an average person like you or me ought to be doing about this. And, from my point of view, I come from a real old school, not the kind of papers that you might have seen at a think tank at any point, but from that old-fashioned school that says that the legitimacy of a government comes from the consent of the governed. And we've got lots of things going on the global stage where decisions are being made that don't reflect in any way on the consent of the governed.
But, Mr. Rothkopf, they tell me working at the heading up Kissinger and Associates, what type of work you did?
It was the Kissinger and Associates is a small consulting firm that advises companies on how they can build their business around the world. But
we know that Kissinger's a big super gopher for David Rockefeller and other big interests. So, that's a very powerful position. You certainly count yourself amongst the 6,000 super class, aren't you?
Heck no. Anybody who's as worried about how do you pay for your daughter's college education as me is not a member of the superclass.
But it isn't about money, though. Isn't it about the levers of power?
It is. But, the definition that I use for, who's a member of this superclass is the ability to influence millions of lives across borders on a regular basis. And I don't do that. But, CEOs of big companies do, big financial executives do, people who run governments do.
Well, here's an example. Henry Kissinger wrote, as you know, in 1973, State Department Memorandum 200, saying that IMF and World Bank money to third world nations would be tied to population reductions, sterilizations, food wars, things like that. Are you familiar with Dr. Kissinger's State Department Memorandum 200 that was then taken on as U.S. foreign policy?
I'm not familiar with that particular document, but I have in my last book and in other things taken a position that, Kissinger did some things when he was Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, that were positive. He also did some things that I didn't agree with, and I'm not out here either advocating what he's done or passing judgment on him.
Well, bottom line, we know that through globalism, which is just I would call it a modern manifestation of the British imperial system. I'm not saying they even particularly run it today, but that same power behind the throne system of good old boys of regional roundtable groups, as Dr. Carroll Quigley at Georgetown said. I'm sure you're familiar with him. Now we're looking at this, and you're right in your book. We're now under a global government. It's just a group of piratical corporations, bigger than any one government, having their way with us. But then the argument is being put forward by that very same consortium to have a even more powerful global government in the name of reining themselves in. That's like somebody saying, please don't throw me in the briar patch. Your comments to that?
Well, first of all, I don't advocate a global government at all. I do think that we could use some global governance. I don't think that the argument that financial elites make that somehow they should be allowed to operate on a global stage without regulation makes sense. And we've seen in the past, couple of weeks a situation where that system, that approach has run amok, and that they then have the power to go to leaders in Washington and say, hey, bail us out at our investment bank while you're ignoring bailing people out who have mortgages at home. So, I think that somehow you've got to get your regulatory arms around that, and I think you need to deal with a whole host of other transnational issues, ranging from immigration to proliferation of weapons of mass destruction to global trade in some way that reflects the will of people at large, as opposed to leaving it to informal clusters of super-empowered people and institutions who are going to act in their self-interest.
Okay, well, here's an example.
Of everybody else.
Our mole got the entire list of attendees at the Trilateral Commission meeting a few days ago in D.C., was able to get the whole list, what they talked about, what they did. There might even be a tape, but we'll see if that gets released. We just had Jim Tucker on a few minutes ago. And there they were saying the government must fully pay in to the banks and, quote, bail them all out.
Well, look, first of all, I don't know what happened at the Trilateral Commission meeting. I do know the Trilateral Commission has sort of been on hard times in the past few years, as a lot of the people who were originally involved in it aged, and it didn't replenish itself.
Yeah, you say that on page 162 of Running the World.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, as a group that's kind of past its sell-by date. But, having said that, I also know that this recent meeting is an effort to try to see if you can bring some new blood into it and restore the process. Having said that, you look at the list you've got there, and 60-70% of the people in the room fall into the category of wonks rather than people who've got real power. So, that's really a talking shop.
What would you call yourself?
Pardon me?
What would you call yourself?
In what respect?
You wouldn't call yourself.
Would I call myself a wonk?
No.
Yeah, probably. I'm writing books, I'm writing articles, I'm out there offering my opinion, but I don't have any ability to sort of, move people in the direction of my opinion beyond, whether I express it clearly or not.
Well, look, we know that the big think tanks and the big military-industrial complex foundations are studying human activity, studying how we behave, engineering our society. That came out in the church hearings about the Carnegie Endowment for Peace that you're in. So, again, you guys all come across as real reasonable and friendly and everything's okay. But when I ferret into Richard N. Haas writing Club of Rome documents admitting global warming's fake, but saying that we need to use it to make humanity the enemy so the state can organize against humans. Have you read that quote?
No.
Are you friends with Haas?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty friendly with Richard Haas, but I got to tell you, that sounds ridiculous. First of all, global warming isn't a fake, but secondly, in whose interest would it be to engineer that? Who would benefit from that?
Why did Hitler want to kill everybody else but him and his people?
Look, well, I mean, the motives of
he got that from the West. He got that from the Carnegies. He got that from the Rockefellers. You know who funded eugenics? That is the main driving force of everything in our society.
Well, I mean, again, I don't certainly.
Well, are you compartmentalized? Let's say maybe you don't know. I mean, what division are you? I mean, I've got your title here, but what do you do at Carnegie?
I'm just a visiting scholar. I work on things like international economic issues. I work on things like America's role in the world. But what I do is I write books and I write articles. That's what I do. I wish I had the kind of influence that is normally ascribed to these groups, but most of the guys who work in think tanks are former this or former that, or they're academics and they're trying to influence policy. And all you have to do is listen to the political debate in the United States today and to see what that debate's about to realize they're policy types aren't having much influence on the debate at all.
Okay, let me read this to you. This is Richard N. Haas, first published in the First Global Revolution, 1991, republished Club of Rome, 93, just republished last year. In a report titled The First Global Revolution, Club of Rome, globalist think tank, we find the statement by Haas. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. And he went on to call for state sovereignty must be altered in a global era, that a system of world government must be created and sovereignty eliminated in order to fight global warming. And it goes on and on. And you're saying I'm not for global government, I'm for global governance. That is a semantical trick. I mean.
Well, you could say that, but take an issue, take an international issue. One has to acknowledge we live in an era where there are whole sorts of issues that are beyond the ability of individual nations to deal with. And so the question is, how do you deal with them? And if you don't want to have global governance, you don't want to have, some kind of mechanisms that are actually connected somehow to the people, who resolves these issues? What I'm saying is, if there's a void, then the way it gets resolved is the competing self-interest of the most powerful people and companies and institutions. And that means there's very few people at the table, and it's always going to be resolved in the direction of one self-interest or the other. And the vast majority of people who don't even figure in these conversations, the 3 billion people in the world who live on less than $2 a day, they're not anywhere in the conversation. And, I just come from a school of thought that says, everybody has a right to influence their own lives, and we need mechanisms to do that. Just as we want them on a national basis, we now live in an era when we need them on an international basis, or we're going to leave it to the super empowered.
Superclass, the global power elite in the world they are making, is a manifesto for how the elite plan to shape the course of our planet and impose a new world order while combating the inevitable global network of anti-globalists. This is Paul Watson writing for Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. The author of the book, David J. Rothkopf, is a visiting scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and has previously served as the Deputy Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade during the administration of Bill Clinton before he became Managing Director of Kissinger Associates in 1996. And he did an interview for Salon. I have seen that you guys and gals are coming out of the woodwork now and are engaging the public and aren't denying everything now. Is that being done because your great work is now about to come to fruition, or is that being done because you see massive resistance forming in every quarter across the planet?
Well, look, I can't speak for why anybody else is doing anything. The reason I wrote this book was that I felt that there are a bunch of issues that need to be addressed that aren't being addressed, and that I feel that, when I look out at the discussions about globalization, they tend to be taking place within elite forums in ways that end up serving elites, and that we would be better off if we had a broader discussion that brought more people to the table.
Now, you've repeated that 7 times, and that's basically, you're like a pulsar. You just, repeat.
Well, it's possible that it's, it is also possible that that's just my view, right?
No, I understand that that's your view. But, this Delphi technique of repeating the same thing over and over again, I'm trying
to answer the question. You want to ask me a question about something else? I'm very happy to answer the question about something else.
Listen, we appreciate your time. I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm trying to understand something. I'm explaining the globalists, the crowd that has worked together, and we've got Rockefeller speeches thanking you guys, in basically one, major direction. You fight about some things to set up global power by the corporations to amass all the power you can. And then now you say, oh, we've taken your regional and local control away. Come now, energize and support a world government so you get your power back. And then I look at how the UN operates, and I look at how everything else operates. But you're talking about getting rid of the last levers I've got nationally. You're the crowd. The corporations always want to get rid of my sovereignty. And then now you're saying, oh, no, to stop them, you need to get rid of sovereignty.
Well, I don't think I'm saying any of that. I do believe that we need to preserve national sovereignty. I believe that nation states are going to be the fundamental building blocks of the global system for a long time to come. What I'm saying is that there are gaps in the system forming because there is so much global activity. And, we've got two kinds of international organizations in the world, weak and dysfunctional. The UN, the IMF, the World Bank, all of these were cooked up 60, 70 years ago to respond to a post-World War II reality, and the countries that are most influential and the issues that are needed to be addressed are different from the ones that those organizations were built to deal with.
And now John McCain and you and everybody else are calling for a new global system of, quote, democracy, these League of Democracies, which I guess you can form and get rid of the bureaucracies in your image. But, that's always basically been the plan, is to use the UN and NATO and other groups as building blocks in the new world order system.
Well, look, I think that there was a plan at the end of the Second World War to create international institutions so that we didn't end up fighting the kind of wars that have been fought for the preceding several hundred years because the cost of modern warfare had grown too high. I think the issue now is, what kind of institutions work best? Should those institutions somehow disenfranchise nation states? Of course not, because you need institutions that are as close as possible to people to reflect the interests of those people.
Yeah, Prince Philip, Ted Turner, the head of the Human Genome Project, Dr. Watson. We have thousands of their quotes. Now they got to build a world government so they can carry out the big black op. Then you talk to globalists and technocrats, and they'll tell you point blank. I've had them walk up to me on the hike and bike trail, and it'll be a retired U.S. senator. And, Mr. Jones, you're wrong about what we're doing. It's not run by one group. It's not one power structure. We don't all want the things you say. All I know is that what the Rand Corporation says happens. All I know is what these big commissions call for happens. All I know is I hear about the League of Democracies. We're losing our freedoms. Pentagon-designed MIT control grids are going in, and the government calls it a control grid. Police are tasering and killing people every day. All I know is, Mr. Rothkopf, would you say that this is all just happening because the state is growing out of control, or because there isn't order? I mean, you're saying there are some power structures. A, who are the different power blocks? How would you break it down? And then B, what would your answer be to counter that?
Well, first of all, the way I broke it down was, there was a book 50 years ago written by a guy named C. Wright Mills called The Power Elite. And it looked at how in the United States, political, military, academic, cultural, other kinds of power leaderships tended to be kind of interlocking directorships. A lot of people knew each other and worked together, and what the consequences of that were. And I said to myself, well, if I'm going to go look at that kind of group today, it's going to be on a global stage, not just on a national stage, and I thought I'd look at how it broke up. But, you could look at political power structure in the United States and you see fragmentation. You look at it on a global stage, there's more of it. You look at businesses and they have competing interests. Oil companies want something completely different from what alternative energy companies want. You look at it in media, and again, they're competing interests. So, to say that, somehow there's a grand plan out there that's being achieved, that's not the main problem. And frankly, if I were worried about people with too much power, what I'd be worried about is the reality more than the myth. And the reality is that very often people with a lot of power act in a self-interested way. And when those interests align, because they are so super empowered, they tend to get their way more than average folks who don't have the ability to offset that.
Well, we have thousands of quotes by top globalists saying the House of World Order will cost money and blood. We're going to kill anybody that gets in our way. I can read those if you'd like from, just incredible British lords, you name it. And then we see everything they called for 80 years ago being built. And then now they're saying, oh, global government will stop us. If that will defeat us as they start hundreds of foundations, and push them and run them and, constantly drive for all of this. Well, who is the most powerful then? You say we need this global system to stop these evil globalists. Who is in power? Who are the major power brokers right now?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about international finance, there are 50 institutions that have $48.5 trillion, and those institutions thus, control about a third of all assets. If you're looking at companies, there are 250 companies that have annual sales that are roughly a third of global GDP. So clearly, when you've got more assets, you've got the ability to determine how those assets are allocated.
But it's all interlocking. It's all interlocking. I mean, the Rockefellers...
It is interlocking. You're right about that.
The Rockefellers are about to fire Rex Tillerson because he won't go along with the global tax scheme. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, they're not going to fire him because they don't have enough power to do it. But the point is, it is interlocking. It's just not all interlocking. There are a lot of self-interested groups acting in competition with each other out there. And, you've got me wrong if you think I've written a book or I'm arguing for global government. What I'm arguing for is a bigger say for the people in an area where right now most of the decisions are being made by a handful of people.
I agree with you that it's already being made outside of our power. But do I want to give those same banks...
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
David J. Rothkopf is our guest. The new book is out in stores. Get it, read it, analyze it. Superclass, the global power elite, and the world they are making. We've got him for about 4 more minutes. We appreciate him spending time with us. I've just got one more question, and sir, and then you can make whatever key points you want that you haven't been able to make, and that's this. Who would you, and I know they're all interlocking, and I understand they're not totally monolithic, but power wants more power. Bureaucracy wants more power. I know there's competing interests, but they're all going in the same direction. It's like a pack of wolves. I mean, they all want to eat deer. They may fight with each other occasionally. They may have different color pelts, whatever. But they're all going in the same direction here. And that is, what's more powerful? Bilderberg Group, Bohemian Grove. I know Council on Foreign Relations is just a British Roundtable regional group. But I mean, overall with those structures, what would you call more preeminent, more powerful? Is Davos now more powerful? Today, what's the most powerful?
Well, I think the most influential is going to end up being the biggest because it's got more people there, and so if a consensus is formed or sort of common view evolves, it's going to reach more people, and so my sense is, probably Davos, the World Economic Forum, is more influential than these other ones that you're talking about. Having said that, Davos is mostly a bunch of people going around giving speeches and not much really interesting happening. What it does do is it helps set the agenda. It helps influence the discussion. And I think the greatest power that a group like this has is this kind of agenda-setting ability. And, I got back
they
from Davos.
set consensuses there and get the flavor and the tone and the direction.
Yeah, they do. I got back from Davos one year or two ago, and somebody said, what happened there? And I said, I came to the conclusion, Davos is the factory where global conventional wisdom is manufactured. They're not making decisions. But
what are you going to do with the web? In your book, you talk about a new internet phasing out the old one.
Well, look, the web is great in the sense that it empowers people. It's led to all sorts of grassroots movements that enables people to go and create information and share it in a way that only the rich and powerful could have done before.
But
having said that, if you take Microsoft, Google, AOL, Yahoo, and MySpace, they can, those big corporations are responsible for 96% of the internet access in the United States. So it has made some people very rich and powerful. It has also empowered a lot of people. It's just not.
So what needs to happen? An Internet 2 with other corporations and institutions, and then you'll sign on to it and have a subdomain Internet 2?
No, I don't even know what an Internet 2 is. I think that the empowering qualities of the Internet are wonderful.
So what are you calling for with the net?
I'm not calling for anything. I don't have any agenda as far as the net goes.
Well, I got some quotes here. I don't have time to dig them out, but, you do Your book doesn't have anything about the Internet or...
No, it talks about how the Internet has created some, members of the superclass, and it has talked about the power of the Internet to help democratize.
But you say something about domain names and the UN.
I do talk a little bit about ICANN, which is one of these sort of very, very, very narrow global governance mechanism that helps assign domain names that has worked better than some other, groups like the UN. So, the point is, I believe that globalization is not a reversible trend. I believe that, there's never going to be a referendum in which we sort of vote against it. It's a historical trend that's a continuation of the Industrial Revolution. And so the consequence from my perspective is, what do you do about that?
Well, you know what? I want to just keep you for one more minute past the break for our Internet audience, John, so keep him on with me. For folks listening on the web, we're just going to skip 1 minute of this break because I wanted to ask you about what are these
866-644-1933. Find the book at SurviveMartialLaw.com. Protect your family.
From his Central Texas Command Center, deep behind enemy lines, the information war continues. It's Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am here and I am back live. I was just, you like that? I open up the studio door and start screaming so that I'll be on air. Forgot that was a short segment, short break coming back because I was talking to the globalist guest that we had, David Rothkopf, on, and then I ran out for a 1 minute break and came back a bit late there. Let me just finish my comments on him, and then we will go to Mike Rivero, our next esteemed guest. I talked to him during the break and just made the point that, in your book you talk about these anti-globalist groups and how they have to be dealt with. And he said, yeah, they're Ahmadinejad and they're people like the Venezuelan president. They have to be dealt with, these super nationalists. See, everything they do is meant to sound so reasonable, so nice, so friendly, so good. It's just reasonable. Don't you want to say, and I've seen UN white papers and others that have been published where they said a decade ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, different organizations said the same thing. We have to give people a false choice. They know there's a global government now. They know the global corporations are controlling them. We have to give them a choice, a false choice, of a democratized world government. That's us getting energized behind it and supporting it and having kangaroo meetings and votes that don't matter. Or you can just let the global corporations do whatever they want and act however they want because they've already achieved global governance. They're just rogue pirates doing what they want. No, we use nation states to prosecute them, to go after them, and pretty soon they would quit doing what they were doing if the people took their nations over. It's kind of like in your state, one jurisdiction's got bad cops, another jurisdiction has good cops. Do you want to get rid of all the jurisdictions? I mean, I stay out of Williamson County because I've just seen too many horror stories, too many bad things happen, too many. I'm not saying all their police are bad, but I mean, it's legendary. They arrest you 2 days after your videotapes are late to Blockbuster. I mean, it's any way to get you. I mean, I've been to court there. I've covered it. I've watched it. I mean, it's Boss Hogg on steroids. Do I want them being able to come down here? I hardly go fishing on Lake Travis because LCRA are just complete, total psychopathic maniacs. And they're a private organization. They surveil all of Austin. They have cameras up all over Austin. I know some of their former security people. They are involved in all sorts of corruption. That's in the news all the time. They do whatever they want, when they want, how they want. It's literally a private mafia organization. And I'm strongly considering never going on Lake Travis again. The problem is there's less and less places I can go. Not that I'm doing anything wrong. I don't go to dangerous parts of East Austin where there are well-known MS-13 and Crips and Bloods. They have their own local Austin names, but it's the same deal. Just like I don't go around dangerous street gangs. and it's getting worse and worse. I want to be able to go to another country if the U.S. completely falls. The problem is it's global. Standardized police brainwashing, standardized brainwash public, standardized control. I mean, that's what the globalists push for, standardized taxation, standardized regulation. They take your blood for 30-plus years in every major Western country. That was an international agreement, international DNA database. They use it for bioweapons. They use it to frame people. They use it in claiming whatever they isolate the compounds or DNA or proteins, the government and the private corporations they give it to claim ownership. People start suing as they learn, mainly through this show. The last decade that's going on, Bush gets a bill passed and signs it last week, saying we take your DNA and blood for criminal databases. All babies are criminals. I mean, that isn't freedom. Suck it all for us.
Well, Superclass is looking at how power has changed in the modern world and how, there have always been elites, but what's emerged in the past 20 or 30 years is an elite that operates on a global stage as opposed to a national stage. And obviously when an elite's on a national stage, you've got this kind of umbrella of sovereignty, laws, and other things that can help rein them in and give people at large a voice. But on the global stage, of course, you don't have that. You've got big companies that can play countries against each other. You've got small clusters of people who can influence how financial markets that might be regulated in a country operate.
It's Willie Nelson. He's declared his eternal enmity against the New World Order on this radio show, along with thousands of other prominent people. But we've got somebody who likes the New World Order, an apologist for it. He is the former head of the Kissinger Group. He is one of the top people at the Carnegie operation that has shaped this wondrous world we all live in. And he wrote the last book, Running the World. He has his new book out, bound to be a bestseller, Superclass, the global power elite and the world they're making, all about
beyond regulation on the global stage and so on. And so what the book's really looking at is how this shift is impacting our lives, whether it's diminishing the influence of nation states, who's rising, who's falling, and tries to, ask the question, what do you do about it?
So this is the model I saw in think tank papers 25 years ago, where we're going to give the slaves a choice of, are we going to have a world government system that you have a stake in, or is it going to be a world government system that you don't have a stake in, but we end up with world government either way? And as you write in your book, we basically have these non-governmental organizations that are trained SEALs for the 6,000 super elite. I love how you guys engineer each crisis and then offer each new solution to the crises that were created by the global super vampires.
Well, I don't use the term super vampires, and I don't refer to trained SEALs in the book. What I do try to do is look at what the trends are and ask the question, what an average person like you or me ought to be doing about this. And, from my point of view, I come from a real old school, not the
Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, CFR. And he is, of course, David Rothkopf. And we appreciate him coming on. I guess kind of the new generation of Henry Kissinger prototypes. And we appreciate him spending time with us. And I was talking to him in the break, and I said, I said, hello, sir, thanks for coming on. He started laughing. And I said, you know my views. He said, yeah, I know them. So we appreciate him coming on. Thanks for coming on with us.
My pleasure.
So tell us all about the New World Order and about the Superclass and the people that run it.